This is Cindy Kelly. It is Friday, November 7, 2014, and I'm in Delray Beach, Florida with Jim Schoke. First question is, please tell me your name and spell it.
James A. Schoke, James, James, A. period, Schoke.
Great. We have a wonderful interview with you about your Manhattan Project days and your role as an inventor. This session is to catch up with you about a man who was not too long ago awarded a medal by the Russian President Putin for his work as a spy in the Manhattan Project. And this is something that really
came as a surprise to me.
Good. So let's talk about that.
George Koval, I met him at, he was in Dayton, Ohio at Monsanto operation, which was concerned with producing polonium and with beryllium making triggers for the plutonium bomb. And he was an instrument technician there, maintaining instruments that I had worked on considerably to substantially improve from the design pre-war designs. And polonium is an alpha emitter. This isotope of polonium, and I think it was polonium-210, is an emitter of alpha rays, and the equipment that I had improved were alpha ray detectors. So they had a lot of them there at in Dayton. George Koval, I had to, when my equipment was installed there, I went there quite often, and I had to train him on how to maintain this equipment, which included polonium. That isotope of polonium had a fairly high vapor pressure, which means it would float around in the air and deposit on things. So when the samples that they were measuring, which were usually thin platinum discs with the sample on it, and the platinum disc may be 1.5 inches in diameter or 1 inch in diameter, and the samples would be put into a chamber that had two parallel plates, each about 2 inches in diameter, one above the other, and the polonium, when it was on these discs, had a tendency to contaminate the chamber, so that you constantly had to clean the chambers in order to be able to measure new samples. And so one of the things I had to develop was I had to find a sandpaper, a light sandpaper that could be used to sand the two plates that one of which the sample sat on, and I had to go through, get samples of sandpapers from all the companies that made sandpaper in order to find a sandpaper that would do the job without also contaminating the plates. In other words, one that did not have alpha ray emitters or had very little. any rate, George Koval was a very nice guy. I mean, we became friends because I was there quite often, and from time to time continuing to make improvements on the equipment, and having to show him what the improvements were and how to maintain and so forth. He was excellent technician. He knew his job very well, and he was friendly. Of course, I had no idea he was a spy. In fact, not until Cindy told me that he had been a spy. The amazing thing to me is that he wasn't detected at all, and he got away with it. They went through great pains when I was transferred to the Manhattan Project to investigate my background in great depth. Many members of my family and many friends, old friends of my family, were questioned by the FBI. So I don't know how he got by with it. It's amazing to me. At any rate, he did. And I don't know what more to say about him.
Okay. Well, that's very helpful. Let's see. Now, did you know him at Oak Ridge, or did you ever meet him there?
My memory says no, but I may have.
Right, because he was a health physicist.
Right, and he was involved with instruments for measuring radiation levels, and which I also, in my group, development group, was involved with, and I did liaison for that group. So I might have been in contact with him, but I do not recall it.
Did he have many friends?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry. He was a friendly, very friendly type, so it wouldn't surprise me if he did. But I actually don't know. We only had business together. We didn't. We may have had lunch or something like that, but other than that, we didn't socialize. So.
Can you describe him?
Well, he was a nice-looking guy. I think he was a little older than I was. I don't remember his height, but I know he was a good look. He had a nice-looking face, and that's about all I can recall at this point.
How old were you at the time?
At this time, I was 20 and 21.
So he could have been how old?
I'm guessing mid to late 20s.
Did he have any accent when he spoke?
No.
Can you say that?
I do not recall any accent. I think he was raised in the U.S. That's my impression. That he may have told me where he came from. I don't specifically recall now.
Now, what kind of access do you suppose he had as a health physicist? Did he have any secret clearances?
Oh, as a health physicist, he had great access to lots of wherever people were working. He potentially could have access. Now, exactly what his access, where I know his access was, I don't know, or if I did, I don't know now. He probably had access to the X-10 reactor and the chemical facilities that for processing the uranium after it was taken out of the pile, and he would have great access, yes, because wherever people worked, that's where health physicists did their monitoring.
So can you just help someone who's new to this explain a health physicist's role?
A health physicist's role is was to look for radiation that would be damaging to a human being. From the sources could be contamination of a table or a chair, or it could be a device that was being operated, like a glove box in which people were working with the radioactivity by putting their hands into rubber gloves that were sealed and inside of a box. But the box, if it had gamma ray emitters in it, the gamma rays would go out of the box and they could irradiate people. So, although some boxes were shielded more than others, but so their job was to look for sources of nuclear radiation that could be damaging to workers. That's what a health physicist did, and then take steps to correct it themselves or get somebody in maintenance or whoever was assigned to do that kind of work to get rid of the contamination. It was a big job. Health physicist was an important job everywhere on the project where radiation was being radioactive materials rather were being worked with or on. And they had the theory was that you were only supposed to have access to what you needed to have access to, and for the most part that was that was watched. Now, instrument people in general had more access than some others, because instruments were used all over the place. There were portable instruments and the instruments on desks, so that if you were maintaining instruments, you had good access to. And again, the thesis was that you only were told what you needed to know to do your job. It didn't quite work out that way, at least for the instrument group. I can't speak for others. For the instrument group, we developed and serviced instruments for so many different fields of endeavor on the project that we had to have broad access as a group. So, and you never knew where you were going to be sent the next time to service an instrument that was made by your group. So
you yourself, that was your role, right? Servicing these instruments?
My role was primarily developing and doing liaison later. But early on, I did service instruments.
And your liaison would be to train others.
Yes.
How to use them and service.
Maintain them, right.
So in your course of the Manhattan Project, what sites did you go to? What sites in the Manhattan Project were you going to travel to?
Oh, I went to quite a few. I went to Dayton. I went to St. Louis, where Mallinckrodt Chemical was. I went to Site B once, Hanford. Not Site B, I'm sorry, Hanford. Site B was, we had several sites on the University of Chicago campus, one of which was called Site B. And Site B was where they machined and aluminum clad uranium for the piles, particularly for the X-10 pile at Oak Ridge, which was the first, not the first pile, but the first production pile for making plutonium. And it was an experimental pile, its purpose being to find out the most efficient way to make plutonium. And where else did I go? Well, of course, Los Alamos many times. New York once or twice. Boston once. That's about all I can think of right now.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
3 major sites and
Right.
then some. And you were stationed where?
University of Chicago in Chicago.
So
Yeah.
in New York, what,
It's called, the project there was called the Metallurgical Laboratory, or METLab for short.
in New York, what sites did you visit?
Just one. I think it was at NYU. Somebody, I can't even recall who now. Someone there had one of our instruments from our that was made in our group, by our group. By our group, and needed some training or had a problem with it, so I was sent early on to go there.
Could it have been Columbia?
It might have been Columbia. I really don't recall
That
for
was
sure.
where the vast majority of the work happened.
Well, there was a lot of work at Columbia, yes, but I'm not sure. I don't
We'll
remember.
have to look that up. Let's see. Well, you went to a lot of places. So, in terms of the level of security, how did it differ from site to site? That some
Definitely,
tell us about that.
definitely differed from place to place. The security at Los Alamos for what was called the tech area was much higher than, for example, at the University of Chicago, at any of the sites. Although at Site B, it was a pretty secure site. In fact, at Site B, I developed. I probably mentioned this in a previous interview. I developed a device for detecting uranium. Guys would take, because it was a unique kind of material. They didn't know it was radioactive, but it oxidized and got black, had a dark blue dust on it. When it was machined, it gave off big sparks because the parts coming off were hot and they were oxidized very easily by the air, by the oxygen in the air. So you saw these sparks as he was being machined, and they knew it was a secret project of some kind. So it was very tempting, and the guys took chunks of it home, which was actually dangerous for their family, because if they handled it, they could get this dust on and ingest it, and alpha rays inside of you aren't good. So And uranium was an alpha ray emitter, or uranium itself may not have been, but one of its byproducts. It probably was an alpha ray emitter. It probably was to begin with. And yes, that was security work. I'm trying to remember Dayton. Dayton's security was pretty good too. Yes, to get in and out of Dayton was they were careful. Yeah, it was the operation that I went to was in a school that had been taken over for an old school, an empty school that had been taken over for that purpose in Dayton. It's kind of interesting. Classes, like classrooms. A lot of the work went on in.
I've seen photographs. It's a beautiful red brick kind of Victorian seminary. It used to be.
Oh, is that what it was? A seminary?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's no longer, but it was quite a stunning building. I'm wondering about Oak Ridge. So how did the security there compare?
Well, the only places I went and was permitted to go was X-10, the reactor, and all the related chemical facilities where some of our instruments were used. And the security was good in the areas I was at. Yes.
One of the things that people at Oak Ridge who either were part of the Manhattan Project or came shortly after and knew how things were in terms of security and so forth, they were surprised that George Koval would have had access to a vehicle to drive from site to site.
I have no knowledge of that at all.
How about yourself? Were you ever, when you had to go from place to place, how did you get around at Oak Ridge?
I didn't have a vehicle. They would send a vehicle to take me where I had to go. If it required a vehicle.
If it did, you would have some driver and a vehicle.
Yes. Yes, usually a military guy. I mean, I was not in uniform for most of the war. About the last 8 months or year, it was very surprising. One day we received, on a Thursday or something like that, we received an order to show up Monday in uniform. All of a sudden, the whole campus bloomed from very few uniforms, guys in the Navy who were going to medical school or things like that, to a whole campus full. It was crazy. But the military, those things can happen. Yeah, we were all very surprised.
Did you have, when you traveled, were you then expected to travel in your uniform also?
No, not until we went back into uniform. No, we were in the I'm trying to remember. No, I was no longer in the Army Reserve. I was on active duty, but not in uniform. Yeah.
So it was just the Chicago campus and facilities that had this new rule.
You mean back into uniform?
Yeah.
I don't know, but I know it happened there. I don't know if it was limited to there. It probably was limited to the University of Chicago campus.
Right. I just thought because you traveled to other sites, you might have had to, that you would have to stay in uniform if you went to Oak Ridge.
No, not until. I will say this: there were many more people working that were in uniform at Oak Ridge and at Los Alamos. At Chicago, the University of Chicago, there were none, unless they were visiting. Somebody in uniform came, until that order came out to get back into uniform. Yeah.
But Koval wasn't. I've forgotten. Was he a member of the SED? Did he?
Yes, he was.
So did he have? Did he wear civvies or did he wear his uniform?
I'm not sure. The memory doesn't say. He was not. He could have easily, if he was in uniform, could easily have been in. I can't remember the name for it. Dungarees, but there's a name for them.
Khakis?
Off duty. No, the off duty.
Off-duty. Oh, I see.
Type of stuff, like overalls, or
Right.
blue jeans, but not blue jean material. Another cloth material, not like the khaki, but more of a cotton.
Right.
There's a name for it, but I can't remember it now. My 90 years old is showing.
Hardly. Well. So did you know any other spies?
No, not that I know of. No.
You may be back.
It's kind of interesting. My group leader, Wendell Bradley, who was a fantastic instrument man, knowledge of electronics and instrumentation, had been a member of the Communist Party when he went to college for a very short period, but he was approved, and of course he was not a spy. That's for sure. So it's strange. Some people were not approved and others were, even though they had some questionable affiliations. Of course, when he went to college, was in the Deep Depression, and it was not unusual for people to be looking for answers elsewhere. And the same thing with Oppenheimer and his wife. So,
It's also the time of the Spanish Civil War.
yes,
And that
yes,
captured people's
yes,
imagination.
absolutely, yes. Some people got involved in the politically in that
Right.
situation here in the States. But they were older than I. They were people in their 30s probably when I was in my 20s, early 20s.
You were still it's like pre-adolescent probably in 36.
Oh, yes,
Yeah. So you were not engaged. Yes.
12 years old,
Right.
Yeah. 36.
Right. Do you know people that were rejected from service or from the Manhattan Project because of past?
No, I didn't know any.
Yeah.
But I may have discussed this in a previous interview. This young lady who was on campus who befriended many of the people on the Manhattan Project, and then one day disappeared.
It's a very nice-looking young woman.
Yes, and one day disappeared from campus. the word was that she was picked up as a spy, or as a potential spy, I don't know. But that's as close as I got to, to knowing somebody who might have been a spy. Except perhaps like Koval, I had no idea he was a spy. Yeah.
Very few people at Los Alamos had any clue that Klaus Fuchs was a spy. And
Yes.
he was giving a tremendous amount.
Or Greenglass.
Right.
And Fuchs, however, was much more effective as a spy than Greenglass, from what I've read. He was much more knowledgeable. He was a PhD, so he was much more knowledgeable. And what he saw, he could grasp more easily.
He was, I just happened to finish a biography of him by Mike Rossiter, The Spy Who Changed the World. He was a brilliant person.
Yes,
And
that's what I've read.
Right, and he was highly recommended by, and worked very closely with Rudolf Borel and Cockcroft and Chadwick and the other leaders of the British.
In England, yeah.
In England.
Yes.
And he called himself a controlled schizophrenic. That he actually, when he was charged finally in 1950 by the British of violating the Official Secrets Act, he couldn't imagine, he confessed. He confessed not only to this one incident, of which they were able to trace, but to 7 years worth of spying. It was flabbergasting. They were floored by the magnitude of what he had given to the Soviets.
Yeah.
And yet, in his own mind, he confessed in part because he just didn't think there'd be any repercussion, that he was much too valuable to the British atomic work, that they would take action against him.
Yes.
So, at any rate, everybody was very surprised.
Yeah.
By him.
What was his?
He was in the theoretical division.
No, but I mean, he why did he? Was he a communist, or
He was a
communist. Did he feel? Oh, he was a communist.
He was from East Germany, or what became East Germany, and he was just hated the Nazis and their repression, and he joined the Communist Party, and the Nazis sent 60,000 communists to concentration camps.
Oh, yes.
So they were equally hated, Jewish and non-Jewish. You know, the Communist Party was on their list. So he fled. He left to get his PhD working with Max Born in Edinburgh, and then joined many of his former German compatriots in Cambridge. But he didn't seem to think that was a double crossing involved in giving the Soviets the information.
He thought I don't understand. If he was a communist, he knew he was doing wrong. There's no question about that.
Yeah, he was. And he I don't know.
There were people in this country who felt the Russians were allies. I don't know that George Koval learned anything from me that would be useful to the Soviets, to the Russians, because he only maintained the operation of the instruments. He didn't repair them if they went if something went wrong. So he did not know what the circuitry was of the chambers that was in the chambers. He could have opened one up and traced it. Perhaps he might have done that, but there was no reason for him to do that. That, it seems to me, might have attracted attention if he had attempted to do that. I would think it would have, because he was not supposed to repair those chambers. He was only supposed to maintain the operational aspects of it so they weren't contaminated and so forth. And the contamination was determined when there's no sample in the chamber, no sample to measure. The background, what's called the background of the chamber, in other words, the emission of alpha rays, or sometimes the cosmic rays going through the chamber, would cause a pulse that would be detected, and that was the background. So whenever you measured samples, you always had to measure the background before and after, and subtract that from the measured quantity. And as I said, there was no reason for him to deal with the circuitry. He was told if the circuitry stopped working, then you put a new chamber in and send the chamber back to Chicago for repair.
And maybe he sent a few to Moscow.
Pardon me?
Maybe he sent a few to Moscow.
That's possible. I think somebody would have known that, I hope.
Yeah, the inventory.
Yeah.
Somehow missing
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
Yeah. What would you say to George Koval if he was sitting here instead of me?
Oh, wow. I don't think he'd want to hear what I say to him. Yeah, I wouldn't be very friendly. Would not be very friendly, yeah. I have no tolerance for that. None at all.